Christian parenting.
Hey, KyAnn, welcome to Part of the Mess. How are you today?
I'm great. You?
I'm good. Tell me about you. We do not know each other, so this is all new. So tell me where you live, how old your kids are, all that good stuff.
Yes, I am KyAnn. I live in Kansas, so in the middle of the country. I'm a wife. We've been married 10 years just a couple weeks ago. We have 3 kiddos, so 5, 4, and 2.5. And we homeschool. We homestead a little bit in the city, so we're those crazy people. And
I
I
love
share
it.
all about finding routine in your days and how to implement intentional rhythms to have more time with your family.
Okay, tell me imagine with that many kids and homeschooling and all that, you've had many stories of burnout, because I think one of the things I experienced over the last 19 years is that it comes in waves. And so you might just hit like an all-time burnout. Then there's little micro moments of like, I am exhausted, which is part of parenting, but there's also kind of when you reach beyond what's possible and you kind of crash. And so tell me, can you give us an example of one time that you burnt out and what God taught you through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. For sure on the micro and the big moments. I would say the big moment for me of burnout, our first 2 are 16 months apart. And so we struggled with infertility before having our first and then had a surprise second very quickly. And I walked through postpartum depression and also burnout at the same time. So we had been
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs previously. We had 2 previous full-time businesses, and I really had just kind of never done the work to set up the rhythms and routines to balance all the things. And I kind of had let my work become my life. You know how that happens slowly and you
Yeah.
don't realize.
Yeah.
And so it was this moment of, man, like everything feels like it's falling in together. And what do I do now, Lord? And trying to figure that out. So I have a specific moment that I remember. If you want to hear the specific
Yeah.
moment, it's quite.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's interesting for depending on where people are coming from. Like, some people have an option. They're like, yes, I can quit the business. And for me, my husband was the breadwinner, so I could kind of go in and out. And there was times I would just like turn the dial down, so to speak. Like if everything's boiling on the oven, I would just say, okay, I'm going to turn speaking down a little bit and kind of, and it would ebb and flow. But some people are like, okay, I can't quit the business. So I guess tell us about your experience. And I would love to hear like advice for that person who's like, what do I do? Like, what can go and how do I shift kind of those rhythms?
Yeah. For us at the time, we were full-time entrepreneurs. So that was our full income. And I would say we were more in the camp of like walking away from this feels like it would be impossible. But the Lord really just laid on my heart pretty strongly that it was kind of like a line in the sand moment for us of either we follow what he's asking us to do to lay down a successful business or we don't.
Yeah.
And so although it seemed like this seems insane, like how do we do this? Now also we did have the ability, my husband could go get a job. That is a possibility. It wasn't our ideal picture, but that is an option that he could go get a job, and that's what we did. And so I remember coming to him and just saying, I think, and he had seen the signs, to be honest, like it was more of me. I had been holding on to it. And so he had seen the signs for a while and was wanting to go down that path because he knew things were not in a healthy place. And I was the one
Mm-hmm.
holding on. And so I think for me, when I got to that point, I originally was like, okay, Lord, like I'll scale back. Like you said, like we'll just let a few things go. We'll simplify. And the Lord
Yeah.
really was like, no, like I want you to walk away entirely. And when you have
Wow.
been an entrepreneur, I didn't go to college. Like this truly was I started my first business when I was 16. And so this had been my entire life. And I didn't realize that my identity was wrapped up in that, but it had
Mm-hmm.
become that because that was kind of, it felt like to me, that was the thing that made me unique. Like that was the
Yeah.
thing that made me different. And
Yeah.
even in a season of having little kids too, there's a lot happening there that you're adjusting to caring for other people outside of yourself. And that was like
Yeah.
my thing of like, this is what I'm good at. And then to be asked to walk away from that and to let it go.
What were some of the symptoms that you both were seeing?
Well, one, just reactivity, I think, in general, like with my
Mm-hmm.
kids, like in the moments, they were close in age. And so I would be kind of like trying to settle both of them at the same time, 16-month-old and a newborn at the same time. And
Yeah.
that's a lot already, a lot of noise, a lot of stimulation. But then
Yeah.
I would have this trigger point where something around the house or maybe my business, whatever it is, would feel like it was on fire. And so then I'm just like, I'm snapping at my kids, I'm snapping at my husband, and they didn't do anything, to deserve that
Right.
in the
Right.
moment. I would say those were
Yeah.
some of the biggest signs. And then also just thinking that I had to numb out constantly. I don't really know how to word it other than that. Like it just felt like what I looked forward to each day was getting in my bed at the end of the night and turning on Netflix or scrolling my
Yes.
phone, like where I
Yes.
could just shut my brain off. And that's what I
Yeah.
was almost living for in that season, is that state when I could finally just nobody needs me and I can just chill.
That's right. That's
When it's
right.
like I had always wanted to be a mom. I had always wanted the family, and how am I now living my life to only look forward to, the moments when I'm away from them?
Absolutely. You're bringing me back to some little years. I think for Ron and I wanted to stay at home with the girls, and this isn't like I don't want to get the hate mail. This isn't a like quit your job thing. But for me, I felt really called to be home with them, and we had double income and we were both doing really well. And so he was like, I agree. You quit and we'll figure it out and we'll pray about it. And we knew we were supposed to be obedient. And so we did. And within the first year, Ron made up my salary through like a series of promotions. Like we expected him to like grow a little bit each year and we would scale back. But it was such like a reminder. And I don't think God does that every time, but it was such a reminder that like he will bless that decision if he's called you to do it and to follow through on it. And so I know you probably felt that as well. And then another thing that happened when my second had colic and reflux and screamed her face off. And I had so many headaches. And I went to my mentor and I was like, I am like about to lose it. Like I'm scared of what's going on and how, like you said, the snapping and the irritation and all that, like super early in the day, like not at like at 4 o'clock, like dad's almost home, like 9 a.m. And so she asked me like, what day does that happen? And I was like, well, around Tuesday. So she was like, all right, we're going to get a babysitter and you're going to try to get help or a mother's morning out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So you have just 2 hours to go walk around aimlessly at Target and kind of get your wits about you. But I was really glad she asked that question to say, like, not like muster up the courage and get through it, but like what a little bit of relief would do for your sanity. So are those some of the rhythms? What are some of the rhythms that you figured out that worked for you?
Yeah. I think what you just talked about is kind of like finding the friction point too of like, is there a specific spot that is bringing that overwhelm and that stress more so? Because we have kind of like I explained, like this trigger point where we're doing okay. Maybe it feels like a lot, but then we have this trigger point where suddenly it's too much. And so for me, the rhythms part, I started with the home and life side of
Hmm.
resetting, like how I manage my home. Those were the things that often were tripping me up of, okay, I go in the
Hmm.
kitchen, my baby is needing to nurse. Sorry if that's TMI, but I'm like trying to feed
No,
my
that's great.
baby while I'm walking down the hallway. And then my toddler's screaming at me that she needs to eat too, because she can't even talk
Yeah.
very much yet. We go to the kitchen and the counter is covered in dishes from last night's dinner that I didn't put away. And so then I'm
Yeah.
like trying to wash the one dish with one hand while I'm feeding the baby, still trying to get the oatmeal for the toddler. And then there's a specific morning in my brain because there always is, right? That you remember.
Yeah.
And on this morning, like my toddler went and we had spaghetti the night before. Why do you leave spaghetti
Yes.
out? I don't know, but we did. And she
Yeah.
pulled it off the table and it went everywhere. And I still don't
Mm.
really know why because let's be honest, when something's set out overnight, it should be like, it shouldn't
Yeah.
go everywhere, but
Yeah.
somehow it
Yeah.
still did. And so that was like my breaking point in that moment and I think the Lord used that to really open my eyes. But when I'm yelling at my toddler for pulling the thing off the table, which, yes, okay, she shouldn't have done that. She's 16 months old. She
Yeah.
has no idea, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is not the balance that we should have here. But it was ultimately like that friction point for me was the dishes all over the counter. I can't even get
Hmm.
breakfast to calm everyone down. That's what they're needing. And so I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
doing the work to look through just one by one, what are the things in my home that are tripping me up that I can set systems? Because I think so much of decision fatigue and motherhood is the things that we're deciding day in and day out. So having systems
Yeah.
for sure, laundry and dishes, but also meal planning. When everyone's asking you what's for dinner at the same time and then you're losing it
Yeah.
because you have no idea
Yeah.
what's for dinner. But then also on the present side of like having a Sabbath with my family, going on date
Yeah.
nights with my husband, having quality time with my kids. It's a balance to me. The rhythms are a balance of just it's living out your priorities, having that structure to live out your priorities. And so it's a balance between productivity and getting done what needs to get done and actually being present in your life while you're doing that.
Yeah, I love that. I remember a friend of mine, I was whining about all there was to do, and she said, it really doesn't take more than like 15 minutes to clean up. And I was like, you're right. I'm like, it really does not. I mean, depending on how big the mess is, but she
Yeah.
was like, I promise you, if you'll just set a timer at night and do 15 minutes, like how much further you'll come. And you're right. Like waking up to a mess is so reality, but it's so stressful. You're like, I can't even find a fork.
Hmm.
So she really helps me just to go like, I know you're exhausted at night, but just that little bit of intention before you go to bed will just, and telling your husband to say like, hey, let's just knock this out together because it will help my morning so much better. And then another thing I thought of as you were talking was my friend Lisa Turkers. I've said this probably 100 times on this podcast, but she says there's a difference between a mistake and a pattern. And so I want to free up the mom that's listening to like, I snapped at my kid yesterday. I shouldn't snap at my kid. It's like, that is reality. But if you're noticing a pattern, like every day I'm frustrated, every day I'm not happy, every day I'm not enjoying my kids. And so I think I would pay attention to that versus the like, oh, I lost my temper there. Not that it's great, but it's like, we're all going to
Right.
do that. We're all going to get frustrated. But really, like, I really started paying attention to, like, I am really sad, like, really overwhelmed and really sad. And had my mentor pray for me. And then my mom finally, when Larson was 6 months old, said, like, I don't think you're okay. I ended up getting on medicine at that point, but I was really fearful of it. But it took some honesty with me to be like, I think I'm faking that I'm fine. And then my mom's like, I can tell in your eyes, you're not fine. And
Yeah.
so, how would you encourage moms that are like, is this postpartum? Like, I'm just not good at this. Like, there's a lot of emotions and circumstances that come in with those early years.
Yeah, that is a good question. I think postpartum depression too can display differently. So as far as like the actual postpartum part of this conversation, I think letting someone into that, your husband, I think
Mhm.
is very helpful, but also even someone outside of that, like a trusted friend, your mom, your sister, and actually opening up about how you're feeling because sometimes
Mhm.
there's the saying like you're too close to the when you're in the jar, you can't read the label within the jar, right? And so I think it can be like that with postpartum depression where
Yeah,
you
good.
don't see the signs until it's really a lot and you're pretty much at that breaking point. And so just letting
Yeah.
someone else in that has that perspective because they're going to be they know you. They know your heart. They know like you said with your mom, she knew that that wasn't your baseline. This isn't normal for you and it was past your
Yeah.
point of continuing in what you were doing at the time. And so as far as postpartum goes, that's what I would say there and then obviously seek help. For me I did get on medication for a season and I went to therapy and I think there's a lot of helpful resources as far as that goes. As far as rhythms go,
Yeah.
if we're kind of talking about that side of like the chronic overwhelm, to me, very similar to what Lisa said, this is what I tell clients all the time is if it is something that is a constant, like you are feeling overwhelmed more often than you are not. I am not
Mm.
here to say I eliminate overwhelm in moms, that would be insane. But there is a difference between feeling overwhelmed in motherhood and feeling overwhelmed almost all of the time in motherhood.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is where we need to take a step back and look at, okay, how you live your days is how you live your life. And so that's, for me, that's kind of why I went back to those habits and rhythms, because those were the best mile marker of how I'm living out my priorities as a mom, as a
Yeah.
wife, as a believer. And it sounds silly to say that closing your kitchen at night every night, that could make a difference in the peace that you feel in your home. And yet it does. It makes a huge, huge difference
Yeah.
in how you're able to go throughout your day.
Meaning like if a kid's like, I want some eggs, it's like kitchen's closed, that kind of thing.
More so meaning like no. So that could be good too though. But meaning like closing the kitchen like after dinner is done, taking care of the dishes, wiping off the counters, sweeping the
Yeah.
floor, just doing enough to like shut it down almost like you would like I worked at Chick-fil-A. That's my only
Yeah.
real job
Yeah.
that I've ever had. And so we had to close down at night having kind of this closing rhythm for now it's shut down. We can walk in the morning. Instead of walking in like
Yeah.
I did that morning, 2 dishes everywhere, you feel a lot
Yeah.
of peace of walking in and being like, I'm reset. I'm ready to make breakfast for my kids because I have a counter to do that. I have dishes to do
Yeah.
that. I'm ready to serve people the next morning.
Do you have like a weekly rhythm? I know for Ron and I, and it's changed over time, but he is all about the calendar, has it memorized, knows exactly what's happening. And I'm more of the ADD personality. He's like, wait, what? She has a soccer game. And so he kind of wants to do like a check in on Sundays. And I'm not great at meal planning, but we try, we
Yeah.
attempt to like get something on the table. And so I'm so tired on Sundays, but it helps me so much to be like, okay, let's look ahead. Who's out when? And instead of buying all this food and then nobody's home and I'm frustrated, they're like, why? You didn't know I had 3 games this week or whatever. So is
Hmm.
there a weekly rhythm that helps your family function better?
Yes. Yes. We love our weekly rhythm. We do it on Sundays as well. And we sit down, we look over the calendar. That's like the first thing. Honestly, just communication, I think, in marriage of just being like, this is what we have going on. My husband, so I do have ADHD, but my husband also does. And he's more of the person that never knows what's happening. So I don't know if it's just our relationship that I have to be the one to know. I don't know. But I usually know what's coming up. And he's like, wait, what? We have that. This is already this week. What's happening?
Yeah.
And so it helps
Yeah.
so much to get on the same page so that we're not having these marital disputes and arguments all the time because
Hmm.
one of us wasn't aware. So just to communicate, then we do our weekly meal planning rhythm then. And so I do plan out our meals. And then I have like a staple grocery list. And that helps the process so much because I just plug in what I want for dinners, like what we want together for dinners. I
Yeah.
plan those out. I add those to the list and then I go through my staple list and see what we need, what we're running out of type thing. So that
Love
way
that.
I'm not going to the pantry at 5 p.m. when my kids are asking me what's for dinner and I have some meal in mind. I don't have the right ingredients. So we load everyone up, we go to the store, get the ingredients. And by the time we do all of that and unload everyone, I'm so exhausted that it's like, okay, well, we're going to grab takeout on the way home and we'll make this
Yeah.
tomorrow, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. I found like I was wasting a lot of time going to the store every
Yeah.
other day for just a couple things
Yeah.
that I had forgotten and having that stay to it slowly over time. And then it saves so much time. So we do also check in on our budget. And then we have a couple like relationship type questions, like how can I be praying for you? What was your high and low? Things
Love
like
that.
that. It just, once
Yeah.
you make the rhythm, I don't know about for you guys, but it makes it easier to add a few things in that help us to connect as well as to plan.
Yeah. I love that. So when I was first building my business and blogging and doing all the things, and Ron would always joke, "It's like, why are you stressed about this blog post? Who's waiting on it?" I'm like, no one. There's like 4 readers, but it was like very like important work to me.
Yeah.
But I remember trying to do that, and I'm sure you feel this too, is working from home is great. But when you're working from home, you're doing something and then they'll interrupt your train of thought and then you'll ignore them and then something escalates and they're screaming. And I finally got a behavioral psychologist over, and she was like, "You are ignoring your kids when they're doing great. So you're like pounding, pounding, pounding. And then the moment that they act a fool, then you're giving them attention." And so she helped me really try to reverse it and not try to multitask all the time. Just be like, okay, I'm going to work on this for 20 minutes or whatever. And then try to give them good, positive attentions and then really more ignore or just deflect kind of the, why are you acting like that? I don't know if that makes sense, but it really did help me because I was like, I just wanted them to be busy at like 4 and 6 years old and not fight for hours. And it wasn't,
Yeah.
it's
Right.
like not reality.
Right.
So it was helpful for someone, a fresh voice to come over and look and be like, hey, they're too young to be able to play that long without fighting by themselves. So
Yeah.
can you give us a rhythm as you're homeschooling and you've got a bunch of littles under the house? What are some ways that you're able to get your work done and parent within a
Mm.
day?
Yeah. Well, it's changed in different seasons. So I'll say that. Like in this season that I'm in
Mm,
now, I do have 2 days of childcare. And so I am able to, because I found for me, it was easier if I could separate it at a certain point. I did the
yeah,
nap time thing for a long time and in late evenings. And I got to a point, I always tell people, I think that's good for a season. But if you're getting to a point, like for me, nap time or evening time, like those are the times as moms that we can rest and that we can
yeah,
actually have that margin. And so for a season, that's fine. But then I got to a point where it's like, this is not sustainable for me to
yeah,
continue to grow a business like this because I'm so stretched thin trying to do that in
yeah,
the margin hours. And so
yeah,
then I got childcare. I have help with homeschooling 1 day a week. When they go, it's my husband's cousin that does it, and she's incredible. And so she helps me with that. But I think it's finding like what works best for you and that is going to change season to season. The best, like people always ask about balance, and balance is such a hot like trigger topic, right?
yeah,
But the best definition that I've heard that I use all the time is like balance is like riding a bike, where when you are riding a bike, you are not just like continuing to move forward without leaning a little bit to the left, leaning a little bit to the right. Like that literally is how you keep the balance.
I
And so
like
I
that.
think with my rhythms and work, that has been the case. My rhythms and systems
Yeah,
have to pivot season to season. Now that I'm homeschooling, my work looks different than it did when I wasn't homeschooling. And just knowing enough to be able to tweak and adjust. And it doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you have a
mm,
different set of circumstances. You're in a different season now. And I think sometimes we can get stuck or fall into burnout when we are trying to keep the exact same rhythms and systems that worked in a season that we're not in anymore. And we don't
uh,
realize that.
yeah, I love that. Can you give us things that we could do ahead of the burnout? Is there some proactive, like preventative things that have helped you avoid that tipping point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. Even I just talked about push seasons. I think push seasons, I will be honest, like I'm an entrepreneur. I fully believe that there are going to be push seasons.
Mm,
But if they are constant leading into the next, like, okay, once I get through this launch, or once I finish
yeah.
writing this book, or once I get through this speaking engagement, whatever it might be for your business, then I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
rest. If that's constant, I think that's where it becomes a problem. And then that's where it leads to burnout. Being
Yeah.
intentional to carve out rest and margin while you are going through the busy season and even just identifying, okay, what does help me? What rest and margin in this season helps me to be able to still show up well for my family? Like for us, our
Yeah.
Sabbath now as a family is a non-negotiable. It is a very, very rare day that we would not have our Sabbath as a family. There are times where I work in the evenings. If I'm having a
Yeah.
launch and I need more work time for me, like the evening time after my kids go to bed, I will work then. But I would do that before I would sacrifice my Sabbath because I need that time off of my phone. I need that time to connect with my
Yeah.
family to get through that season and then not totally crash afterwards. My morning routine,
Yeah.
that's another big one of just having that time with the Lord, reading my Bible, going movement is big for me. So like going on a walk is very restful for me. And it sounds silly to say like a 10 to 15-minute walk at the end of my workday changes everything for me and how I go back to my family
Wow.
then. And so I think identifying for yourself, what are these ways that I can incorporate rest and margin? And I know I just said Sabbath, but I want to be so clear that it doesn't have to mean 24 hours
Yeah.
away. Like I really encourage people to start with like 15 minutes. Like start with small blocks that are attainable because that is so much better than having nothing at all.
Yeah. And then you don't feel guilty if like you and your husband have agreed upon a day. It's like you're not staring at him laying on the couch or he's not
Yeah,
staring at
right.
you. You're like, this is our Sabbath and we are
Yes.
gonna do that together. I love that. Day did you say you do it? You do Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah, we do Friday night to Saturday night is how we do it.
Okay. That's awesome.
Sundays just weren't the most restful, I'll be honest, in this season with little kids, getting them all ready for church and all of the things. And so that just kind of has worked out well for us. And we look forward to it. Man, my kids even, we do pizza night. So we go get takeout pizza. We used to make it and now we go get takeout and we love doing that.
Yes.
And
Amen to
so
that.
that's how we start our Sabbath. And every Friday, it's like a whole thing. We all are looking forward to it. It's the best.
Well, and I like that it is a rhythm. It's like you don't have to think about what's for dinner and what y'all are
Yeah.
doing Friday night. And even if you get asked to go to some party, you're like, no, that's our family. So, night. So,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't put on our list, but I wanted to talk about is comparison. I feel like early on, and social media was kind of just coming about when I was a young mom, but like you would look at another mom and you're like, how do you have 3 businesses, homeschool, do your hair, and your like date nights? Like it was that's what made me feel terrible because I'm like, do I just have a really low capacity or short fuse or whatever? And then you'd kind of dig under the story and go, they have 2 sets of grandparents helping them. They have a babysitter 3 days a week.
Yes.
So like, I think we need to be really kind to ourselves and go like, hey, yes, that person looks like they're doing everything, but you don't know all the things that are happening behind the scenes to make that move and just be like honest with yourself to say, hey, you could go to 55 field trips. I have a friend that's like, I hated field trips. She's like, I'll go to one a year. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I loved field trips. So talk to me about that. Have you seen your clients struggle with that and comparison in social media? Do you think that's a piece of why we think we're supposed to be something that we're not?
Oh, 100%. And I think social media, I mean, we all know, but it is a highlight reel. And so we see when things are going well. No one's going to go on social media and talk when they're having the worst day of their life and they realize they're totally beyond their capacity. They're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
And I think every yes is also a no is something that I
Hmm.
talk about a lot. And so we don't see the no's. We see the yeses on social media. We see the yes to the really exciting business thing or even the fun to like park play date with your kids. I mean, comparison can come
Yeah.
in all different forms. And I read a book recently that she talked about how she was having a day with her kids going to the park and she was kind of disheveled and, had a sweatshirt and no makeup and all the things. And she ran into someone who was an executive and was going to the White House to interview someone amazing. I don't remember who it was. And it was interesting because years down the line, they talked. And the stay-at-home mom at that time was comparing herself to this executive, wishing she was back in that season. And on the opposite side, that executive was comparing herself to the mom that looked like she was having
Mm.
so much fun with her little boy going to the park. And that really hit me because it really, I think no matter where you are at, and Courtney, I don't know how many of your listeners have a business or don't have a business, but however
Yeah.
you're listening to it, we will compare something.
Yeah.
And just realizing that every yes is also a no, we don't know the no's. I ask every
Hmm.
guest that comes on my podcast, what is something that you're neglecting for the sake of balance? Because I want to normalize this more to see the childcare behind the scenes. That's why I brought that up because my reality looks different now than it did when I was working just nap times and evenings. Doesn't mean one
Yeah.
is better or not. They're just different. And I am able to hold things differently in each season. And so I think acknowledging to yourself that that is true and like really starting to
Yeah.
see that everyone has different priorities and you need to live in your priorities
Yeah.
The Bible
Yeah.
also talks about limitations being a blessing. There's a verse
Yeah.
in Proverbs that says, "The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places." That is another
Mm.
thing I come back to a lot because we see boundaries often as limiting and like, we can't do XYZ that we want to do. But the Lord actually has given us those boundaries. And I talk about this a lot with rest as well. It is a gift for us too. And the Lord has
Yeah.
called each of us differently in this season of our life. And
Mhm.
embracing those boundary lines may not be forever. But for now, it actually is a gift to keep you within what is within those boundary lines to keep your focus there.
Yeah, so good. I think moms that have asked me before have always wanted an answer. They want like me to prescribe, work this many hours, do this, and I'm like, my answer to the balance question has always been it's personal and it's seasonal. Just
Mhm.
what you said, it's so specific to you, how many kids you have, your experience, your job, and then it is so seasonal. I mean, I've probably had 9 lives over the course where there was a 3-year break. I turned everything off. And
Mhm.
served locally and supported my husband in that way and my kids. And then there's been seasons where I've had everything on high. And it's just fun to kind of, like, I would say, journey with the Lord on that and just know, like, if he's turning something off or there is that boundary, that he's going to bless that decision. And I've seen it over and over again. I was coming out of a season of like that 3 years and just felt like I was saying, like, okay, go back to work, get back into parenting. And I was like, well, Lord, what? Like, I like to do all kinds of things. What do you want me to do? And it was like 2 weeks later, I think, that Christian Parenting called and said, we have our number one podcast. The host left or is leaving in 30 days and we want you to take it over. And it was such a reminder that, like, in due time, he's going to be like, here's the next thing. And
Yeah.
not to try to get too far ahead of him because we don't know what each season is bringing. Will you tell me, you've written about this topic, you have a podcast on this. Will you tell people where they can find you and what resources may help them if they're really in an area of struggle and this burnout idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So, best place to find me is definitely the podcast. It's called Simple Rhythms for Busy Moms. Everything we talked about here, intentional systems and routines to simplify and organize your life, really to take things out of your head and put them into actual systems, daily rhythms to slow down, like to prioritize rest in your life. How do we actually do that? What does that look like when I have so many things going on? And
Yeah.
finding your identity in Christ and not your to-do list, because
Mhm.
that was me for a long time. How much can I fit in a day? I am successful by how much I can do. So we go
Yeah.
into depth on all of that over on the podcast. And I would love for anyone to come listen, come say hi. And then second place I hang out is my free Facebook community. So I do have a free morning routine guide that you can get in there. And then we do challenges. It's really a bunch of like-minded moms trying to balance motherhood, homemaking, maybe a business on the side. And we'll do challenges like quiet time challenges, screen time challenges, daily walk. I told you I'm big on my daily walks. We love to like just implement those rhythms and put them into place. So you can find all of that at bit.ly/simple rhythms community. And I would love for your listeners to come say hello.
I love that. I'll give you the last word. Will you just give the mom that may be crying driving down the road right now that's like, this is all I know. Will it ever get better? Is it even possible for me to change? I'm stressed out all the time. Give her some encouragement.
Hmm. I think going to the Lord with that feeling first and trusting Him enough to say, like, Lord, I am a mess right now. I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know where to go, but I
Mhm.
trust you enough to show me that next step in front of me and I'll follow. I wanted, and I'm saying this from my experience, I wanted a plan. I wanted to know how it was like when I laid my business down. It was a full, like, I didn't know if I would ever come back. And I think what I've
Mhm.
learned from that is that the faith comes in trusting that we don't know what's coming next
Yeah.
and trusting that the Lord really will provide. As silly as that sounds, listening to a podcast episode, you can pray on your way home and maybe find one resource. Maybe you find a blog
Mm.
post. Maybe you find a coaching program or something that you want to be in. Maybe you find a friend that you talk to about
Mhm.
this that becomes your best friend. You don't know what the Lord is doing, but just trusting Him enough that He's going to hold you in that and He's going to show you a
Mhm.
way that is so much better than the reality that we have now.
Yeah. Thank you. So, so helpful. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much for having me, Courtney.
Christian parenting.